On his YouTube channel, Capturing Christianity, Cameron Bertuzzi recently posted a video asking who created God. His response was that since God is a perfect being, it is incoherent to ask who created him. Now, I understand and I follow this argument, but I don't find it satisfying. Probably because I'm not as smart as Cameron. And I can see how my atheist interlocutors might poke at it, saying that perfection is a subjective term. I can have a perfect pizza, for example, or a perfect bowling record. But that does not mean that there are no flaws in my pizza tastes or in my bowling performance. We might say that prior to his fight with Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson had a perfect boxing record. But that his boxing perfection did include him getting hit in the face by big, powerful men several times. And this is not the kind of perfection that Cameron's talking about. I realize this. Cameron is talking about absolute perfection in every sense, such that there was no point of existence at all where God was less than he is now. Even to say that God was not less by possessing the quality of non-existence. Because a pizza that does exist is absolutely better than a pizza which does not. And so I get Cameron's argument, and I appreciate it. I would answer the question differently, though. So, what caused God? The question begins with a thing in our real world and asks, what made this? So if we look at a glass bottle on a table, we can ask where it came from. We can turn it over and see that it was made by the Coca-Cola Company in Atlanta, Georgia. Sand and other chemicals were heated and then poured into a mold where they were cooled. But where did the sand come from? Rocks, ground down by water and erosion and time. And where did the rocks come from? From the Earth's crust. And where did the Earth's crust come from? And so you can see a regression of causes. That is, C, cause, is caused by C minus 1. And C minus 1 is caused by C minus 2, and so on. And if we stop thinking here, we can postulate that everything must have a cause. Then we simply snap our laptops shut, take a sip of our latte, revel in our own brilliance, and head off to a meeting somewhere. But what if we don't stop thinking? The Earth's crust was created in the events surrounding the Big Bang, where everything was created. And the Big Bang happened because there was nothing, and then nothing exploded and caused everything. Well, maybe it wasn't nothing. Maybe it was, quantum strings of possibility charged with gravity and set in motion by something else. Yeah. And those exploded and caused everything. And now we can sip our latte and get to that meeting. Except that we've just made the same mistake again. We came to an arbitrary point of something, then stopped asking what created it. So if we ask ourselves, what created these quantum strings of possibility? What created the gravity that charged them? And what pushed them into motion? Once again, we have another iteration of C to consider. But wait, why do we need causes anyway? The focus on a cause seems to be the weak point in the argument, so what if we just decided that the universe is uncaused? Then we have denied science. The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy of an isolated system can never decrease over time. And what is entropy? Merriam-Webster defines it in thermodynamics as a measure of the unavailable energy in a closed thermodynamic system that is also usually considered to be a measure of the system's disorder, that is a property of the system's state, and that varies directly with any reversible change in heat in the system and inversely with the temperature of the system, and defines it more broadly as the degree of disorder or uncertainty in a system. Entropy, then, is the degree of disorder inherent in the universe. And Newton says that this degree of disorder doesn't change, that the universe is a less than perfect system and is winding down like a spinning top. And the energy which propels it will eventually be expended, converted to heat, and the top will cease. Now, if the universe is winding down like a top, albeit much, much more slowly, and will have an end, then it cannot be eternal. Why not? Because if there were an infinite amount of moments prior to this moment, the energy would have been expended an infinite amount of time before this. We would not be here because the universe would have already gone cold. Therefore, the universe had a beginning, and this is the reason for the current Big Bang theories. It is logically impossible for the universe, which is subject to Newton's second law of thermodynamics, to be eternally old. Okay, so it has a cause. Now, if a thing, that is anything or everything, has a cause, let's call that cause C. But C cannot exist without a cause because of Newton's first and second laws of motion. So C has a cause, and we'll call that C minus 1. And of course, C minus 1 has a cause, which is C minus 2, and so on. And what we find is a regression of causes. But can that regression be infinite? No, it cannot. Because of Newton's second law of thermodynamics, it cannot be infinite. Let's suppose that each cause exists only for 1 second. In a single second, C minus 3 pops into being, caused, of course, by C minus 4, and then causes C minus 2 to come into existence, pop, pop, pop. If each of these causes requires only 1 second to both come into existence and then cause the next iteration of causes, which I think you will agree is a very generous number, and if the number of causes is infinite, then we must postulate an infinite number of seconds prior to this one. If there are an infinite number of seconds prior to this one, then the universe would have already wound down, like that spinning top, because of Newton's second law of thermodynamics. We cannot, therefore, have an infinite regression of causes. There must be an initial cause which itself needed not to be caused. Logically, there's no way around it, and we've already determined that the universe cannot be that cause since it itself is subject to the law of entropy. So given all this, what do we know about the initial cause? We know that the initial cause is not subject to Newton's laws, either the first and second laws of motion, nor the second law of thermodynamics. We know that since space, time, and matter are all correlative, that is, you cannot have one without the other two. You cannot have a thing, for example, without a place and time for that thing to exist. Space, time, and matter all came into existence at the same moment. And since whatever caused them must have necessarily preceded them because it must exist in order to create, it cannot be subject to space, time, or matter. It must be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. It also must be incredibly powerful in order to create everything that is. Now, all the energy that we experience on this planet, the electricity, the nuclear power, the explosions, the wind, the erosion, all the energy we experience on this planet is only a tiny, tiny fraction of the energy in all of existence. Massive stars in far galaxies produce and expend far more energy than our entire solar system, and there are millions of them. Whatever created the universe must be more powerful than the universe. It must also be personal in that it chooses to go from a state of non-creation to a state of creation. That is, it makes a change. And so we have discovered from these arguments and from Dr. Frank Turek in his brilliant lectures that this initial cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, and personal. Now, if we had to give such a being a name, what would we call it? We would, of course, call it God.